For 14 years, I never missed a single Saturday dinner with my family. Not once. It didn't matter if my job kept me at the office until midnight. It didn't matter if I had deadlines stacked on top of each other, or if I was exhausted after another brutal week as a financial analyst. Saturday dinner was a rule in our family, and I always showed up. My father used to say I was the dependable one, the daughter who remembered birthdays without reminders, the one who brought dessert, the one who never forgot to call. So that Saturday evening, nothing felt unusual as I drove toward my parents' townhouse. A large pot of homemade beef stew sat carefully on the passenger seat beside me. I had been cooking it all afternoon. My dad loved that recipe: slow-cooked beef, potatoes, carrots, onions, and a splash of red wine. The smell filled the car, warm and comforting. It smelled like family. When I pulled into the driveway, the porch light was already on. A soft yellow glow spilled onto the walkway, the same way it had every Saturday night since I was a teenager. I parked carefully, making sure not to take my younger brother Marcus's usual parking spot. He always insisted that that space closest to the gate belonged to him. Some things never changed. Balancing the heavy pot of stew in my arms, I climbed the familiar brick steps. Right foot, left foot. Pause on the second step. That one had been loose for years. I reached for the door handle, but before I could open it, I heard my name. Melanie won't say no. The voice belonged to my father. I froze. Inside the house, voices echoed through the tiled hallway. My mother sounded nervous. Marcus, $200,000? That's insane. How did this even happen? Marcus's voice snapped back quickly. It doesn't matter how it happened. What matters is fixing it before anyone starts asking questions. There was a pause. Then my father spoke again, calm and steady. We'll handle it. My heart started pounding. Marcus lowered his voice, but I could still hear him clearly through the door. Melanie just got promoted. She's probably making, what, $140,000 now? Maybe more with bonuses? The stew suddenly felt heavier in my arms. I stood perfectly still. My mother sighed. She's worked so hard for that money. Marcus laughed. Exactly, which means she has plenty to spare. The words hit me like ice water. My mother spoke again, quieter this time. We'll tell her the roof is leaking. Ask for $30,000 first. Then later we can say medical bills came up. Marcus replied instantly. Spread it out. She'll pay. She always does. My chest tightened. Inside the house, my father chuckled softly. Remember when Marcus needed money for his business? She gave him $20,000 without asking for it back. Marcus added another example. And the signing bonus she handed over to help you two? $40,000. Then he laughed again. Honestly, who does that? She still thinks we're some kind of perfect family? My hands began to shake. My mother's voice cut in sharply. Don't talk about your sister like that. Marcus scoffed. She's naive, Mom. She thinks showing up with stew means something. The pot nearly slipped from my hands. In that moment, standing outside the door with dinner I had spent hours making, I realized something terrifying. To them, I wasn't family. I was a bank account. My father's voice ended the conversation. She'll help. She always handles things. That's who Melanie is. Inside the house, chairs scraped across the floor. Dinner was about to begin, and they had no idea I had heard every word. I slowly stepped away from the door, careful not to make a sound. The stew in my arms was still warm, but something inside me had gone completely cold. I walked back to my car in silence, and as I sat there in the dark driveway, one thought repeated in my head over and over again. If my family thought I was their solution, they had no idea what I was about to become. But what they didn't know was this. By the next morning, Everything they thought they knew about me would be gone, and the first thing I did would shock them.
I didn't drive home right away that night. Instead, I drove aimlessly through the quiet streets, past gas stations, late-night taco stands, and neighborhoods where nobody knew my name. The pot of stew sat on the passenger seat beside me, slowly losing its warmth. Earlier that evening, it had smelled like comfort. Now it just smelled like a lie. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. "Mom, where are you, sweetie? Dinner's ready." I stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. "Sorry, Mom, got called into work. Emergency audit." 3 little dots appeared almost immediately. Then another message. "Can it wait?" I already knew what would come next. The plan I'd overheard replayed in my mind like a recording. The roof. 30,000. Then something else later. I typed one last reply. "Boss says it's urgent. Rain check. Love you." I put the phone face down and kept driving. By the time I finally pulled into my apartment garage, the stew had gone completely cold. I left it in the car and went upstairs empty-handed. Inside my apartment, I didn't turn on the lights. I just stood by the window, staring at the city lights flickering through the palm trees outside. And slowly, the truth settled in. Over the years, I had given my family more money than I wanted to admit. $40,000 the year I graduated college, $20,000 when Marcus's business collapsed, smaller amounts here and there whenever my parents said things were tight. I never kept track. I never asked for it back, because I believed something simple, that family helps family. But standing there in the dark, another realization took its place. They didn't see my help as kindness. They saw it as weakness. By the time I went to bed, a quiet decision had formed in my mind. I wasn't going to confront them, not yet. First, I was going to protect myself. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Instead of making coffee, I opened my laptop. Then I logged into every financial account I had. Savings, checking, investments, old retirement accounts. One by one, I transferred everything into new accounts at a completely different bank, accounts my family had never heard of. Next, I froze every joint account that still existed from years ago. Then, I changed every password, added 2-factor authentication, updated every security question. My phone began buzzing constantly. Calls from Mom, calls from Dad, calls from Marcus. I ignored them all. Finally, after 3 hours of quiet work, I leaned back in my chair. For the first time in years, every dollar I owned was completely out of their reach. But I wasn't finished. There was one more thing I needed: advice. So, that afternoon, I sent a message to the only person I trusted with something this serious, my boss, Susan Richards. The subject line was simple: personal, need advice. Susan was the kind of woman who had built her career by fighting battles most people avoided: sharp, direct, impossible to intimidate. When I stepped into her office later that day, she didn't smile. She just motioned for me to sit down. "What's going on, Melanie?" I took a deep breath, and for the first time, I told someone everything. The dinner, the conversation outside the door, Marcus's fraud, the plan to make me pay for it. Susan listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with every detail. When I finally finished, she leaned back in her chair. "You've handled this better than most people would," she said. Then she added something that made my heart skip. "But if your family is willing to manipulate you like that," she paused, "you need to prepare for the possibility that they'll do something worse." My stomach tightened. "What kind of worse?" I asked quietly. Susan folded her hands together. "The kind where they try to force your hand." She slid a business card across the desk toward me. "A lawyer," she said. Then she added one more sentence that would change the direction of my life. "Also, there's an opening in our London office." My breath caught. "London?" She nodded. Better pay, same position, and about 5,000 miles away from this mess. For a moment, I couldn't speak. An ocean away from my family? An entirely new life? The idea felt impossible, but also strangely freeing. What I didn't realize yet was this. My family wasn't about to let their solution disappear that easily, and before the week was over, they were going to make a move that shocked even my lawyer.
2 days passed after my meeting with Susan. 2 quiet, strangely peaceful days. No surprise visits, no emotional messages, no desperate requests for money. Part of me wondered if my family had simply decided to give up. But deep down, I knew better. People who believe they're entitled to something rarely walk away easily. Late Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang again. Marcus. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail like the others, but curiosity got the better of me. I answered. "Melanie," Marcus said immediately, "where have you been? Mom said you skipped dinner." His voice sounded casual, like nothing had happened, like I hadn't stood outside that door and heard every word. "I've been busy," I replied calmly, "with work." There was a short pause. "Well," he continued, "we need to talk, as a family." I almost laughed. "A family meeting?" I said. "That's interesting." "What's that supposed to mean?" Marcus asked. I leaned back in my chair, staring out the office window at the traffic below. "It means I'm curious," I said. "What exactly are we talking about?" Marcus sighed, clearly annoyed. "Mom and Dad are dealing with some financial issues. The house needs repairs. It's serious." There it was, the roof, right on schedule. "How much?" I asked. Another pause. 30,000, he said quickly, just to get started. The number rolled off his tongue too easily, almost like he'd practiced it. I closed my eyes for a second. Then I said something that made the conversation change instantly. "You should have practiced the lie a little better." Silence filled the line. "What are you talking about?" Marcus asked carefully. I didn't hesitate. "I'm talking about the night you were sitting in Mom and Dad's kitchen planning how to take $200,000 from me." Marcus stopped breathing. I could actually hear it through the phone. You were listening?" he said slowly. "I was standing on the porch, holding a pot of stew I spent all day cooking for family dinner." His voice hardened immediately. "Melanie, it's not what you think." "Really?" Because it sounded exactly like fraud. "Look," he snapped, "I'm in serious trouble right now." "I know. Tax evasion? Wire fraud? How do you even—" "You said it yourself that night." Marcus exhaled sharply. "Listen to me," he said. "If I can pay the money back quickly, it might stay civil." "And you thought I'd be your solution." "You can afford it," he shouted. The sudden anger in his voice surprised me. "You've got the best job in the family. You're making more money than all of us combined." I felt something inside me go cold. "I couldn't afford the $40,000 I gave Mom and Dad after college," I said quietly. Marcus didn't answer. "I couldn't afford the $20,000 I gave you when your business collapsed either." More silence. "But I gave it anyway, because I thought that's what family does." Marcus's voice dropped to a desperate whisper. "I'm begging you, Mel." The words hung in the air between us. "If I don't fix this," he said, "I could go to prison." For a moment, the old version of me almost responded. The version of me who believed fixing things was her responsibility. But that version of me had died on a front porch 2 nights earlier. "You should have thought about that before you broke federal law," I said. "You're really going to let your own brother go to prison?" he asked. I didn't hesitate. "I'm not letting you do anything. You made that decision all by yourself." Then I ended the call. Within seconds, my phone exploded with messages. Marcus, Mom, Dad. But I ignored every single one. Because for the first time in my life, I understood something clearly. My family didn't love me. They needed me. And when I stopped being useful, they were going to turn against me. What I didn't know yet was how far they were willing to go. Because 2 days later, I opened an envelope at my office desk that made my lawyer laugh out loud. My own parents were suing me.
Friday afternoon was quiet at the office. Too quiet. The kind of quiet where the entire floor feels slower than usual. Most of my coworkers had already left for the weekend, and I was finishing a report before heading home. That's when the receptionist's voice came through my desk phone. "Melanie? Yes? There's someone here asking for you. He says it's legal." My stomach tightened. "Legal?" "Send him up," I said. A few minutes later, a man in a gray suit stepped off the elevator. He looked like he'd delivered bad news 1,000 times before. He walked straight to my desk and handed me a large manila envelope. "Melanie Carter?" he asked. I nodded. "Please sign here." I scribbled my name on the clipboard. He gave a quick nod, turned around, and walked back to the elevator without another word. Just like that, he was gone. I stared at the envelope for a long moment before opening it. Inside was a stack of legal documents. The words at the top made my brain stall for a second. Formal complaint. I blinked. Then I started reading. My parents were suing me. According to the document, they claimed that the money I had given them over the years had actually been loans. Now they were accusing me of demanding repayment and cutting off contact, causing them emotional distress and financial hardship. For a moment, I thought it had to be some kind of mistake. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was so absurd my brain didn't know what else to do. They weren't just trying to manipulate me anymore, they were trying to punish me. I immediately called the attorney Susan had recommended earlier that week, Carol Kim. She answered on the second ring. "Carol Kim speaking." "Hi," I said, "this is Melanie Carter. Susan Richards told me to call if anything strange happened." There was a brief pause. "What kind of strange?" Carol asked. "I think my parents just sued me." Another pause. Then Carol said, "Email me the documents." I scanned everything and sent it over. 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. Carol. "Well," she said the moment I answered, "I have good news." "That's a relief," I said. "They don't have a case." "None at all?" "None," she confirmed. "There's no contract, no paperwork, nothing proving the money you gave them was a loan." "So what happens now?" I asked. Carol's voice sharpened slightly. "If you want, we could countersue." "For what?" "Harassment, defamation, emotional damages." The words sounded heavy, too heavy. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the city skyline through the office window. "No," I said after a moment. "You don't want to fight them?" Carol asked. "I don't want their money," I replied. "I just want them out of my life." Carol was quiet for a moment, then she said softly, "That might be the healthiest decision you could make." We ended the call shortly after. I placed the legal documents in my desk drawer and locked it. For the first time since that Saturday night, I felt something unexpected. Relief. Because their lawsuit told me everything I needed to know. They weren't sorry, they were angry that their plan had failed, and that meant there was only one thing left for me to do. Leave. That weekend, I started packing my apartment, not just for a move, but for an entirely new life. The movers were scheduled for Tuesday. Destination, London, an ocean away from the people who had treated me like a walking wallet. But on Sunday night, Marcus called again, from a number I didn't recognize,
And what he said in that final phone call made me realize something terrifying. My family still believed they could change my mind. What they didn't understand was that I had already said goodbye. By Sunday evening, my apartment barely looked like home anymore. Half the furniture was gone, boxes were stacked against the walls, each labeled for the movers arriving Tuesday morning. The place felt hollow, like the echo of a life that had already ended. I was taping the last box in the kitchen when my phone rang again, an unfamiliar number. Normally, I wouldn't have answered, but something told me who it was. Marcus. I picked up the phone, but didn't say anything. His voice came through a second later. "Melanie, please don't hang up." I leaned against the kitchen counter. "What do you want, Marcus?" There was a long pause on the other end. Then he said the same thing he had said before. "You're really going to let me go to prison?" I sighed quietly. "I'm not letting you do anything," I replied. "You committed the crime." "You don't understand," he said quickly. "I'm going to lose everything." The words hung in the air. I looked around the empty apartment. I already did. My family, my trust, the belief that any of you actually cared about me. Marcus's voice cracked slightly. "I was scared, Mel." "You laughed about it," I reminded him. "You coached Mom and Dad on how to lie to me." He didn't deny it. Instead, he whispered, "I didn't mean to hurt you." That sentence almost made me laugh. "You didn't think about me at all," I said calmly. There was nothing left to argue about, nothing left to fix. "Melanie," he said desperately, "I'm begging you." I closed my eyes. "I already told you what to do." "And what's that?" he asked. "Beg someone else." Then I ended the call, and this time I blocked the number. No more calls came after that. No more texts. For the first time in weeks, the silence felt peaceful. Monday morning arrived faster than I expected. I stood in the middle of my nearly empty apartment and looked around one last time. Every piece of it had been built with years of hard work, every dollar earned, every step forward fought for, and yet, somehow, the people who were supposed to love me most had only seen one thing: opportunity. I zipped my last suitcase and placed it near the door. While clearing the final kitchen cabinet, I found something pushed behind a stack of baking trays. The stew pot. The same one I had carried to my parents' house that night. The same one that had been full of warmth, hope, and a belief that family meant something real. I ran my fingers along the rim for a moment. Then I dropped it into the trash. The metal clang echoed softly in the empty kitchen, and, strangely, I didn't feel sad. At the airport later that day, I checked my luggage and sat near my boarding gate. Just before boarding began, my phone buzzed one last time. Another unknown number. But I knew exactly who it was. My mother. The message was short. "I'm sorry. Not for asking for help, but for the way we tried to get it. You deserved better." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed a single reply. "I hope someday you become the kind of people who deserve forgiveness." I turned my phone off after that. 6 months later, I heard the rest through my lawyer. Marcus had been sentenced to 18 months in federal prison for tax evasion and fraud. My parents had sold their house to cover legal fees and ended up moving in with relatives in Florida. When I heard the news, I didn't feel anger or satisfaction. They had simply become strangers from another life. In London, things were different. I had a small apartment overlooking the river, new coworkers, new friends, people who saw me as more than a signature on a check. Sometimes, on quiet Sundays, I still made stew,
But not for them. For myself. Because I finally understood something I hadn't known before. Love without respect isn't love. It's just a debt someone expects you to keep paying. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is walk away.